Right, so we'll be looking at E15.2 today on page 217 of the question book. And the question reads as follows. You are assisting a client, the stationery box, a small retailer, prepare its monthly remittance advice for suppliers Zwanes pencils. A statement is received from Zwanes pencils dated 31st October showing an amount owing of 22,940. Then they give us a list of transactions from 1 to 9, and this list normally is the differences in the reconciliation process, right? So they compared the statement to the T account. So let's read the required. Required number 1 says calculate the correct balance in Zwanes Pencil's account in the subsidiary ledger of the stationery box, starting with the account balance of 7244. And then we must calculate the amount paid to Zwanes Pencil starting with the statement balance of 22,940. So we're going to go through the list of transactions and identify whether the transactions should be in the books of the business, should be corrected in the account, or should be taken to the remittance advice. So we start with the opening balance in Zwanes Pencil's account. The balance is 7244. And then we can also open the balance in the remittance advice, and that was an amount of 22,940. So we put that in. Right, now we go through the list of transactions. The first transaction says invoices on the statement are undercost by 1,000 Rand. So invoices we know increases the statement because the more we purchase, the more we owe. So if the invoices was undercost by 1,000 Rand, it means that we have to add 1,000 Rand. So we go to the statement, when we overcost, we add 1,000. Right, transaction number 2. Zwanes Pencil's account in the subsidiary ledger is overcost on the debit side by 100 Rand. So Zwanes Pencils, now we must keep in mind that this is now in the account. However, the debit side was overcost. So if we go to the account, the debit side here was overcost, which means we're going to have to credit the account in order to balance that out. So we put too much on the debit side, so now we have to correct it on the credit side. Keep this in mind, please. When they say that it was overcost, we don't automatically assume that we have to decrease the account, depending on which side was overcost, or if it was our invoices that have been overcost, or our credit notes that have been overcost. Then we look at number 3. It says the statement shows an amount of 11,710 brought forward from April. This was paid 3rd of June. So we made a payment. It will only reflect by them the 3rd of June. So we have to take into consideration the payment. It won't reflect on the statement of 11,710. Right. Then the next transaction. Transaction number 4. In the records of the stationery box, 538 had been credited to Zwanes Pencils in respect of stationery purchased from him, but the amount was debited in error to the rent expense account. So keep this in mind. We purchased now from Zwanes Pencils. His account was credited with 538. So that part is correct. But instead of increasing our stationery account, we increased rent expense. So does that have any effect on accounts payable? The accounts payable entry is correct. So with number 4, there's no entry needed for us. We have to correct in our books, but we have to correct the stationery account and the rent expense account. The accounts payable part was credited with 538. So there's no entry in accounts payable. Let's look at adjustment number 5. The statement shows goods returned for 550. However, the correct amount is 55. So the statement shows that goods were returned for 550 Rand. However, the correct amount is 55 Rand. So on the statement, we have goods returned. They said we returned 550. However, we only returned 55. So they said we returned more than what we actually did. So they decreased our account by 550, where they should have decreased our account by 55, which means we have to add 495. Right. Then the next one, an invoice of 560 was entered on the statement twice. Now we know an invoice increases. So it was entered on the statement twice, so we have to take one of it away. So we take 550 away. Right. An invoice of 560, oh, sorry, that was 560 that was on the statement. So let's correct that quickly. 560 rand. Right. Then number 7, an entry in the records of the stationery box reflecting goods bought from Zwane's pencils of 1839 was duplicated. So we bought from Zwane's for 1839. We duplicated the entry, so we have to take one of it away. So we say invoice 1839 in order to decrease our account. Then the next one, it says an invoice for 1713 had been entered on the statement as 7113. So again, keep in mind an invoice increases. So the invoice amount was 1713. However, they entered it as 7113, which means they entered 5,400 too much on our account. So we have to decrease with the correction of that invoice. We have to subtract 5,400. Then it says a credit note for number 9. A credit note for 630 had entered on the statement as though it were an invoice. Now, what does a credit note do? A credit note means that we return goods, so that decreases our account. However, they entered the credit note as an invoice. So instead of decreasing our account with 630, they increased our account with 630. So what do we have to do? We have to decrease our account twice. Do we understand that? So the first part is, the first 630 would be to cancel. The second one would be to post the correction. So we post the double amount of 1260. So let's balance the account. We add up both sides. Right, we balance the account. You can do this as well. So my statement balance, my account balance comes to 5505. Please note, for completeness, ensure that you bring the balance down on the credit side of the account. And now we have to balance the statement. So again, we just auto sum. So you can see I made a mistake there. I didn't put the payment within brackets. So if we auto sum that, we total that up, subtract what needs to be subtracted, add what needs to be added, then you can see my account balance as well as my remittance advice reconciles. So work through this example again to try and familiarize yourself with what should go in the statement and what should go into the remittance advice, and label the transactions as you go through. I normally have the T account drafted already, as well as the remittance advice, so you can make sure the entries are entered. What we can also then do is, to ensure that we're following the correct procedure, number your transactions according to the numbers provided on the questions. So the invoice that was undercast there, we put there that was number 1. The payment was number 3, and so we continue. So we label all our transactions exactly according to what the statement reflects, so that when we're doing a reconciliation process, or we can see when we know we haven't duplicated any entries, and we make sure that we've entered all our entries as per the differences shown here. So transaction number 6 is there, and then of course the last one in the transaction was number 8. So the statement is now complete. The balance is given to us, the balance we need to know. Then we have an invoice number 7, which is that correction there, and the overcost was number 2. So then we can see all our transactions from 1 to 9 has been dealt with. Remember, there are transactions that will be both in the account as well as in the remittance advice if it had not been entered correctly or if the transaction had been omitted.